Well, hello and welcome to the Friday wind-up session for Unit 5 of our Digital Me MOOC. That's the 5th of 6, so one more to go. Next week, our final unit, where we'll be talking about digital reputation, but more about that a little bit later. Let's wind up Unit 5. Now, Unit 5 was likely to be a degree of fun, actually, and I say that in a sort of a fairly sort of careful way, because when we're reviewing the mistakes people make, it's okay to find entertainment, if you like, in the consequences of mistakes, particularly when no one's got hurt, of course. But we have to be careful to make sure that we never laugh at people. What we're doing here is laughing at unintended consequences, in effect, and that's really what I wanted you to go after, because the essential nub of this unit is that mistakes happen on the web, not because people are stupid, but it's because we make assumptions and we make base judgments on those assumptions which are incorrect. What we actually have done is that we have just simply not spotted something. It is purely a mistake. It is an error. It is an assumption, if you like. We are not inherently silly people or stupid people. And certainly in this unit, we were not interested in looking at people who deliberately go out of their way in order to shock or in order to cause harm. I mean, that is actually now, in some instances, a criminal offence, and quite rightly so. That's not what we're talking about here. The vast majority of cases of mistakes, unintended consequences, things that happen on the web that shouldn't have happened, simply come about because of innocent error, innocent assumption. And the way to get over that is not to rule it out completely, because we're human. We will always err. We will always make mistakes. But the more you can see how easy it is to make these silly mistakes, and the consequences of those, the better equipped we are as individuals to learn from those and not make them ourselves. It's a bit like saying that, we could say that cars driving down the road are dangerous, therefore we shouldn't use the pavements. That way, as pedestrians, we won't get run over. I mean, that's obviously illogical. What we try to do is that we build in this sense of a highway code. We learn how to use the pavement safely. We learn how to cross the road safely, so that car use can continue and pedestrians stay relatively safe, one would hope. So that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to teach people to be safer and better on the internet by showing them what mistakes are made, but more importantly than that, to show you how easy mistakes are made, and therefore it tightens up and improves our sense of maturity, if you like, in how we guard against making those same mistakes ourselves. And it isn't a case of relying on software to do this for us. Now, to a degree, that is true. I mean, there is software out there that will protect you, and you can change settings, and you should look at settings of all your software very carefully. We'll say more about that later when we talk about the discretion. But the most important way of staying safe on the internet is being mindful of those dangers and being mature and sensible in our use of the web as well. And that's the important message I wanted to get across. Okay, so, well, there is an argument, of course, that any publicity is good publicity. So even those that sort of deliberately perhaps go out of their way to court disaster and difficulty on the web sometimes do it for a purpose. I know that a number of people who have been publishing their autobiography will release as a marketing tool some shocking, horrendous piece of information about themselves that under normal circumstances should never have the light of day. But sometimes people deliberately choose, if you like, to publicize aspects because they know that will give them notoriety and know that it will help with their publicity. What we're talking about here is the vast majority of us who want to use the web simply as private citizens and therefore aren't wanting to sort of dabble, if you like, in the dark arts of the net and deliberately go courting bad news in order to try and gain notoriety. And of course, we need to avoid criminal action as well in the process. Okay, so we know now then, hopefully, that mistakes occur for a number of reasons. The first is quite simple. We just didn't foresee the outcome. It's sometimes called the law of unintended consequences. And it's a bit like taking medication, that sometimes you might take a medication because you want to get the benefit of that medicine, but we have to be mindful of the second and third byproducts, if you like, of taking that may not be so pleasant. And sometimes it can be a juggling act to get it right. Well, sometimes something similar happens. We post something on the internet and we simply didn't intend the consequences that seemed to run away with what we did. We wanted consequence A, but it seems like the public are not interested in consequence A, they're much more interested in consequence B, C, and whatever else, and that carries away, and the thing takes off at a rate of knots. So we have to be very mindful, of course, about what are the consequences of this, and can it be misunderstood, and could it be misconstrued, and is there value to others in deliberately misconstruing what I'm saying? So we want to avoid that one. Sometimes there can be cultural differences as well that we simply don't spot. When you put something on the internet, of course, as we were talking in this unit about these degrees of separation, if you like, and it is quite possible now, unless we really do keep things private, that anything that we post on the web could be seen, searched for, found, and used on the other side of the planet. Now, even if we intended that, we may have very little understanding of cultural awareness of other people who live elsewhere on the planet. So whilst we may mean something to be quite innocent, quite straightforward, other people may take umbrage and may think and therefore read into it, because they don't see the body language, they don't get the context necessarily, that it is an offensive remark. So we have to be very careful now about cultural sensitivities in what we put on the web as well, and be respectful of others as well, because that's what we would expect in return from them. And I think that's the right way, the sort of moving forward, if you like, with mutual respect about how we deal with each other. Sometimes simply poor wording can lead to a problem, and we have to be very, very careful about predictive text, because if predictive text is switched on to anything that we're sending, then it's quite possible that what we write and what we send can be two different things, and of course you can hit the jackpot on that one, and what you send can make sense in a way that you absolutely didn't intend. So be very wary of predictive text in anything that you put out on the web, and read things back carefully to make sure that it says what you mean it to say as well. And then finally, there's the AdHominem argument. AdHominem meaning to the man, to the person, which is where people deliberately go after the writer of an article rather than the quality of the article and the argument that's in that article itself. There really is very little excuse, I think, in any online debate to criticize the author. Because in criticizing the author, you're demonstrating that you've lost the debate, in effect, because you're left with the only port of call, which is to go after the person that wrote it, and in the hope that if you can rubbish the author, then anything the author said, by assumption, will be rubbish too, which of course is not necessarily the case anyway. But any argument is only ever won by defeating the argument, not by defeating the person. So we have to be careful of getting involved into arguments that become personal, and we need to avoid that as best we can. They never, ever achieve anything. Remember when we looked in Unit 3, I think it was, where we talked about how we can improve an argument by refining it, redefining it, by alternative sources, correcting factual error. But you'll notice that all of those things improve the thread and the quality of an argument. They don't degenerate it from it, and that's what we need to avoid. Sometimes we make mistakes, and I've certainly picked up on some of this in some of the activities that have gone on this week, where people reply in the heat of the moment. And a very good tip is, if you feel really strongly about something that you've read and it's really angered you and fired you up, certainly write the reply, because that can be quite cathartic in itself and very therapeutic. But then don't post it. Go to bed, go to work, do something else, and then reflect on whether or not to post it in a few hours' time, once you've had a chance to mull it over. Sometimes people post things in the heat of the moment, and their argument may be very powerful, but it might be that their argument is overpowerful. And what you need to do is either draw back from it, or you need time to reflect and say, well, actually, I know it's a powerful line, but I think it needs saying. So think about doing things in the heat of the moment, and try to avoid posting rapidly and then thinking about it after the event. And then the final thing that we have to watch out for, that has caught a number of people, is where they write privately to somebody, but because the settings are wrong or because the recipient settings are wrong, it gets shared to other people as well. And I think the classic example of this is people that forward an email onto a colleague, not realizing that when they forwarded that email, a whole thread of other emails may be attached to that as well that has also gone to that person. So you get this sort of leakage, if you like, on the net that goes on, and we need to avoid those leaks, because it could be that there can be any amount of untold damage caused if any of that then gets out. Well, what have we seen here? Well, it is the classic case, I think, in all of the contributions that people have put up here. And just, can I say, many congratulations, but there's been some fantastic stuff here. Because of my sort of continued broken arm, which I think you can see still done. In fact, my thumb is now in plaster as well, because they decided at the hospital that the fracture was worse than was originally thought. Typing responses is very difficult for me. I'm down to sort of one hand to do that, although I try to use speech-to-text software as well to reply, but apologies for not replying as much as I would have liked to have done. But well done on the quality of the mistakes that people have found, and it is entertaining. I haven't found anything particularly offensive going on anywhere here as well, and it really does demonstrate. It's an excellent activity for demonstrating how easy it is to make mistakes. But you can see here clearly, and the thing that I was wanting to get across here, the difference between what we talk about with people being tech savvy and being digitally literate. And the people that have made mistakes here, you can see that they have demonstrated excellently their technical savviness, their knowledge of how to use technology to do what people have done. In order to make the mistakes that they've made, they've had to actually behave in quite a sophisticated way with regard to the technology that they've used. You know, we're picking this off websites and things as well that people have done, and they've set up company websites. You know, these people aren't sort of digital newbies. They are of that tech savvy age, but they haven't yet made the jump to realizing about this need for digital literacy. They are still making assumptions that the web is always a positive place, that everyone on the web is as nice as they are, that everybody on the web will absolutely understand what it is they're saying and what they're trying to do. And of course, we know that that isn't the case. So this unit, this activity, has brought into focus, I hope very clearly for you, what we mean about the difference between being technically savvy and being digitally literate. Okay. I wonder whether actually, I mean, in the last few units, we sort of tried to summarize a phrase, but I think for this one, what I would say is that a better way to describe a lack of digital literacy is to say it's a lack of awareness of your self-presence. And self-presence and lack of awareness of self-presence when working on the web, I think, is very important. What I mean by that is that we can sometimes detach who we are as people from the ideas that we place onto the internet, and we detach them, we break them apart, and we feel that because it's gone onto the internet, it's away and it's gone and it's clean and it's lovely and the community will love it. But that detachment, that lack of self-awareness sometimes means that we are making these assumptions and about how it's going to be read and how it's going to go. Remember that what you put on the web is actually an extension of who you are, because when you add up all the things that you are, some of you found this very clearly when you looked in Google in particular, you can see that you can build up quite an important sort of character, if you like, identity, digital reputation we're talking about in the next unit. So this lack of self-awareness in operating the web is the watchword, I think, and that we need to be mindful and self-aware of everything that we actually do. So how are we going to overcome this lack of self-awareness then? Well, remember that when we use the web, we want it to be fun. The web should be something that scares us or frightens us. It can be a dangerous place, but to be a dangerous place, it requires us to cooperate with others in making it dangerous to us. It can actually be, when people are sort of phishing and so on, those scams and schemes work because people respond in a manner that assumes that the person they're talking to is acting in good faith. So we must not cooperate with people in undoing, if you like, our own digital reputation, and we need to be aware of that. Certainly children have a good excuse for that because their lack of awareness of the way of the world, and they need to sort of grow up, and they need parental protection, of course they do. But as grown-ups, we need to apply, if you like, the same rules of self-regard, self-awareness, self-control, and having those sort of warning signs, if you like, that we are got fairly well attuned in our physical lives. We apply exactly the same standard to our online life, and that we don't get sort of carried away with it. So we want technology to be fun, and sort of a bit like the BBC Charter, the web is there to inform, it is there to entertain, and it is there to educate as well. And we should use the web in all three ways in order to do that. That's what we want it to do. We don't want it to become a millstone around our neck, which is why we need to control what we're doing on the web and control what goes on. We talked in the last week's unit about the need to watch out for having the web and the technology control you. It's very easily done, and there are some signs that we put out, I think, in the activities there to say, you need to watch out, because these are characteristics of being controlled by the web. So remember, the web, of course, it contains all humanity, which means that there's everything that we would expect to find that humans engage in is going to be on the web as well. So that there's that need to make sure that we keep the same standards, if you like, running between our web presence and our physical lives that we go as well. Now, I want you to just think very briefly about the use of algorithms and the fact that software that we interact with based very much on algorithms in order to gain efficiencies. And in order for those algorithms and that software to work well, the person who writes that software makes certain assumptions, if you like, about our behavior. And sometimes even makes assumptions about the way they want us to behave in order to fit in with what goes on. A great example of that would be when you go to a supermarket. We put items in a basket, we scan them, we take them to a till, we bag them, we use the trolleys. The whole thing is set up to make a process, all of which actually, whether one realizes or not, is controlling our actions as individuals as we go through the process. Now, going to the supermarket is an incredibly repetitive process, so it works very well because we go along with complying with the way the supermarket wants us to work, because it gets us in, through and out as efficiently as possible, and that works very well. In other words, the software there, which is built into the company, doesn't require too much discretion on our behalf about what we do, other than the items that we pick, which of course are down to us. But essentially, we're taking things off shelves, and the supermarket staff are putting things back on the shelves to replace them. It's a relatively straightforward process, obviously more complicated, but for our argument. And when you go to your bank now, anything that you do in your bank, you may find that you want to do stuff in your bank that your bank staff will actually say to you, without a word of irony, I'm sorry, but we don't have access to the computer system, or we can't do that, or we don't have authorization to do that. Now, when someone says they don't have authorization, what they mean is that the software, the algorithm, doesn't work to support them. It can be quite frustrating sometimes. My point is this, is that in this unit, when we're talking about the way people make mistakes, much of our behavior on the web is compliant behavior. We behave in a way that the software designer wants us to behave for reasons of efficiency, or because of the purpose of what we're trying to get out of the software, or we behave in that particular way for reasons of security or whatever else. And the more software we're using in this way that is system-based, where it is process, or like going through a number of steps, choosing something on Amazon, for example, that's fine. But what we need to be careful of is that in being compliant in that behavior, we don't fall into doing things where we would normally say, hang on a minute, I'm not actually comfortable with that. I'm really not really sure that's the right thing to do. Or I don't think this is right for me. We just fall into the compliance of it, if you like, and that's what we have to watch out for. So be careful when you're looking at software, and ask yourself, what degree of discretion does this software give me? And the more discretion as a user you're given, the greater amount of power you have over that software and the way you use it. The less amount of discretion means that you're pretty much tied into it, and that is fine if it's a repetitive process, but be careful if it isn't. I found myself at a till recently where someone gave me a receipt and then said, can I have your email address for your guarantee? Which sounded perfectly reasonable, but of course what they're actually saying is, we want an email address so that we can now write to you about things that particularly interest you, looking at what you've just purchased, and also send you other sales stuff as well. And it's that sense of compliance where you fall into something without stopping to say, well, is that really what I want to do? And how do I protect, if you want, myself from a whole slew of new emails that may even then be sold on to other companies as well, and have to watch out. So look out for algorithms. Think about this concept of discretion in the use of software. Okay, so on to the final unit. And this is our last one, and it's gone very quickly for me, Unit 6, and we're talking here about your digital reputation. And you're going to be building very much on what you've taken out of the last 5 units in order to look at this one. And we're talking here about your digital footprint, if you like, but not just your one footprint, but your footprints. And your footprints prints help build up, if you like, for you, a sense of digital identity. And your digital identity, of course, isn't fixed either. It changes over time as you add things in, as things happen, it goes up, it might go down, so whatever. So in fact, what we're talking about here is digital identity over time, which is your digital reputation, how you are seen by others on the web. And if you're commercially active on the web, that's very important, because how you're seen by others is how you're going to survive commercially. But also how you're seen by others in the groups and the societies that you're in, and perhaps more importantly, how you want to be seen by others as well. What is it you want to stand for? What is it that you want to take part in? The crowdsourcing activities we looked at in Unit 1 again. What crowds do you want to be a part of? Who is your crowd, and where do you want to stand in that crowd? Very important that we take charge of those things, because if we don't, then the internet does it for us. When you looked at your reputation, if you like, or you looked at your identity using Google, some of the things that I noticed people were saying surprised them. They didn't know they were there because they didn't control it. The web has made assumptions about who you are as a result of other things that you've done that you weren't aware of as well. So if we don't control it, the web will control it for us. That's why we're going to be talking in this last unit about your digital identity and how you manipulate that identity. And I don't mean that in a nasty way, but I mean seriously how you manage it, how you look after it, in order to foster and encourage and develop and produce a positive digital reputation. And on the back of that, in today's world, you will find, one would hope, both commercial success and great success in your private citizenship, if you like, the things that you do on the web as well. And that you will also gain great pleasure, great fun from the relationships that you can form, the clubs, societies that you can join, the administrative paperwork that you can take care with online, so that what you do with the web is that you build more time into your life to do other things. And that's actually one of the things that we're sort of heading towards. Now, when we finish Unit 6, for those of you that want, you can go on to complete a final piece of work, which will lead to a certificate, and more about that next week, of course. But that's it for now. I think we've pretty much covered what I wanted to do here. Plenty to think about, plenty to look at. Well done, everyone, on what you've done. Onwards and upwards. Here comes Unit 6. I look forward to speaking to you again next week. Goodbye for now.